theme, Education from Foundations and Skills to Advancements in Science, Technology, and Innovation, Considering Fundamentals for Transforming Africa. I would like to remind us all of some housekeeping rules before I introduce our high-level panelists. There will be simultaneous translation to English, French, and Arabic. On the bottom of your screen, there is a horizontal toolbar. You click on Interpretation and select the language you desire, English, French. For Arabic, please hit the Chinese icon.
Can you try to start your video now?
It's still the same problem. Okay.
Right.
Should I continue?
You can continue. Can other panelists try to start theirs?
Okay. If you want to listen to both the original language and your language of choice, don't unmute the original audio. But if you want to listen to only your language of choice, you can then mute the original audio. On the bottom of the screen, there is also the question and answer box. As soon as our distinguished panelists begin their presentations, we invite participants to type in questions in the question and answer box. Please make sure for each question you indicate which panelist the question is directed to. This way we will catch up on time when we get to the question and answer session. There is also a chat icon. Use the chat for comments and interactions. To our distinguished panelists, please speak slowly to ease translation. Remember to mute your microphones when you are not talking. Check often the question and answer box so that you may begin to answer questions addressed to you by the participants. We request panelists to please respect the 10 minutes time allocation. Being informed that this webinar is live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and it is recorded so that you can, after this presentation, always go back and listen to it. Today, we'll be listening to a wide range of discussion issues with a bid to address the following questions. How may Africa ensure a meaningful and seamless transition and throughput across the educational value chain from primary school, secondary school, tertiary to university? How may Africa achieve greater efficiency and better outcomes in building skills for today's workforce and tomorrow's labor markets that delivers both productivity growth and improved livelihoods? How may Africa's public and private education institutions play a greater role in driving science, technology, and innovation development? What policy and financing modalities are needed to enable the African education sector better respond to the current and emerging needs, especially the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic? And lastly, what initiatives are needed to strengthen higher education, science, and innovation in Africa? It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished panelists who will lead us through the discussions today. We have Honorable Dr. Aita Kanji Morangi. She is the Minister of Higher Education, Technology, and Innovation of the Republic of Namibia. Honorable Professor Dr. Eleanor Landikan Yayi, the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research of the Republic of Benin. Honorable Dr. Brian Mushimba, Minister of Higher Education in the government of Zambia. We have our honored guest speaker, Her Excellency Professor Sarah Anyang Agbo, the African Union Commissioner for Human Resources, Science, and Technology. Dr. Amit Dar, Director for Operations and Strategy of the Human Development Practice World Bank Group. As our discussant, we have Honorable Professor Aya Bagima, Minister of Technical and Higher Education in the government of Sierra Leone. At this point, distinguished panelists and participants, I invite the Executive Secretary of RUFORUM, Professor Ekwamo Adiba, to give us his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, our moderator, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, Professor Sarah Anyang, the Commissioner for Human Resources, Science, Technology at the African Union Commission. Our distinguished speaker from the World Bank, Dr. Amit Dar, honorable ministers from Namibia, Benin, Sierra Leone, Zambia, thank you very much for accepting our invitations. And to all participants, we appreciate very much your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, to set the stage of this webinar, I invite us all to watch this brief video by the World Bank Group on investing in higher education in Africa.
Imagine a future where science, technology, engineering, and mathematics drive Africa's growth, where African expertise leads the way in discovering and applying new technologies and in finding new ways to adapt to climate change and to fight disease and hunger. That future is now. The World Bank is working with African governments, universities, faculty, and students to help modernize higher education, to empower institutions with the knowledge and financing they need to create regional centers of excellence and meet industry demand for skilled technicians, engineers, medical workers, agricultural scientists, and researchers. The message is clear. Support Africa's Lion Generation. Prepare more young Africans to get the skills they need in science and technology. Align higher education with the growing demands of Africa's thriving private sector. Work with partners to build skills that transform lives. Make Africa's future now.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, clearly Africa needs high-end science, technology, and innovation capacity to achieve its development goals enshrined in Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. This will require putting in place the centers of excellence highlighted in the World Bank documentary and other educational and skill development infrastructures. To achieve this, we must have the foundation right and interconnectedness across the education value chain. Hence, this webinar seeks to address the fundamentals for transforming education across the educational value chain in Africa. Why, if I may ask, ladies and gentlemen, This is because education, science, technology, and innovations are the fundamentals for the development of any nation. Indeed, no nation has developed without a strong and skilled human resource. But this needs to be backed by a strong science culture. And yet these two facets are key gaps in our continent, Africa. Indeed, this is recognized in the call for action to achieve our Agenda 2063. We need collaborative action to build our science, technology, and innovation capacity. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we can go far. Accordingly, ladies and gentlemen, if I may briefly say, Forum was formed primarily to focus collaboration and networking among universities in Africa to help the continent develop the requisite human resource to drive its development agenda and to generate technologies and innovations to increase the competitiveness of our continent. To do this well, Forum and other education institutions and network need support from African Union and its organs. We need support from our governments, and we need partnerships within and outside outside the continent. Consequently, we must listen to perspective from these bodies, policymakers, and some of our partners, including development actors. Today, we are very, very privileged to listen to distinguished panelists who will be sharing their knowledge, experience, and expertise on how best to address the challenges inhibiting skills development in science, technology, and innovation across the education value chain in Africa and in their respective countries. I thank each one of them and our moderator, the Vice Chancellor of University of Bamenda, our Forum Deputy Chair, for accepting to be part of this high-level discussion. I also thank you, distinguished panelists, for joining the webinar. As mentioned by our moderator, please do participate actively in the dialogue through the chat box and the question and answer sessions. Indeed, we are recording this webinar and it will be available through all our media outlets. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I once again invite you to watch this short documentary of an example of what Forum is doing to train the next generation of scientists for Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I wish you good deliberations.
Today you are going to visit what we are calling Namulonge Agricultural Crop Research Institute in Uganda. Most of the research staff, the senior staff, are retired. So it was really important for this network then to start training staff, training scientists that would go and work in those research institutions. Robert Kawuki is a young scientist who came and worked on a new disease that emerged throughout most of sub-Saharan Africa. He was able to work with his supervisor, Professor Tuka Muhabwa, and identified 2 varieties of soybeans. Those 2 soybean varieties are now being grown throughout sub-Saharan Africa.
I received a fellowship from the Forum. It was a 2-year fellowship. And within that fellowship, I had to undertake 3 studies on soybean rust. I was very happy that at the end of that 2-year work, there was one variety, Maksoi 1N, which I was very proud of. Uganda contributed to one of the first papers on soybean rust at the world stage. When I went through that training, It provided me a platform for me to further my career.
After working on soybean, he then joined the cassava program. Today he's one of those leading a $3 million grant.
We have over 20 million people in Uganda who primarily depend on cassava. The major work that we're doing on transformation is mainly for the cassava brown streak virus disease. And actually in the field, we have some of these transgenic plants under evaluation.
You see how a combination, strategic investment in human capital has supported the strengthening of a research institution from just merely being a national research institution into a regional center of excellence.
We live in a network world, and if you're part of the network, it's easy to find solutions. Science solutions don't keep boundaries. The training within the forum also provide me with a network of both graduate students and of course scientists, both skill and of course knowledge. My vision that I have for cassava is to shift its importance more from being a purely subsistence crop to a crop that can be highly commercialized. It is science that has made us alive. And I know that science has been and will continue to be the factor that determines our happiness or success in life. Because when I use science on the plant side, it enables me to get something onto a plate, and I feel very proud that somebody has got something good on a plate which has come through science intervention.
Thank you very much, Professor Adipala. I will ask all panelists to now switch on their videos. I think that technical problem has been solved, just so that we make sure that everybody is on. Okay, that's great. We're really sorry for the technical hitch, but I think we are now set. Thank you very much, Professor Adipala, for your very rich introductory remarks. I will now quickly call on Dr. Dar of the World Bank. We have to alter the program a little bit because he has a very important engagement that he has to attend to. So, Dr. Dar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chancellor and Chair. Thank you, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests and colleagues. Let me start off by actually apologizing. I will have to leave right after my presentation because I have a meeting to go to which I could not change. So my apologies for that, because I know this is a very important and an extremely useful session. I'd like to start off by apologizing for that. But I'd also like to say that this is a real honor to be here today, speaking at the Reform seminar. And it's especially important given that this is such a critical topic about related to building the human capital that Africa needs to accelerate its rates of progress. And I'll talk a little bit about what the status of Africa's education is in sub-Saharan Africa, what needs to be done to transform Africa's education, what is the World Bank doing to support this? And I'll also talk a little bit as I'm speaking on the importance of investing in agricultural education. So the World Bank recently came out with what we call the Human Capital Index. And the Human Capital Index basically talks about the productivity, the human capital productivity in countries around the world. And for sub-Saharan Africa, we have the Human Capital Index is equal to 0.40, which implies that a child in sub-Saharan Africa can only expect to be 40% as productive as he or she could have been if the individual had enjoyed full education and full health. That means that the region as a whole is losing about 60% of productivity and 60% of GDP for each individual, which is a huge, huge loss, given that our people are in every country around the world, our people are our most precious and most important resources. So investing in people is critically crucial. And obviously, education is the sort of salient contributor to human capital. And so we really need to be thinking about, obviously, we need to think about making sure that people are healthy and productive throughout their lives, but also just make sure that they actually have access to high quality education opportunities so that they can thrive in their careers and future. And I think the video you just saw from Reform really shows that, you know, when given the opportunity, people can do great things and think big things. Now, what has happened recently, as we all know, is that while the region has been making good progress in expanding access to educational opportunities, it has very low human capital outcomes. And so one of the big challenges that we face is to make sure that these outcomes can enhance, can be improved over time. Let me give you a couple of statistics on the higher education side. Right now, the gross enrollment in tertiary education is below 10%, which is the lowest in the world. So Africa really needs to do a lot of catching up. And the global average is 38%. So, you know, there's a big, big gap to be crossed for Africa to reach that level. Significant inequalities also persist, with higher education trend to be mainly something that only the affluent students can afford, and often subsidies are targeted to the richest quintiles. Gender parity in higher education is also the lowest globally, and so, you know, these are big challenges that need to be overcome. And what has happened recently as a result of the COVID crisis is that the learning crisis has actually only deepened in the region and actually across the world. And what we are very concerned about is that the impacts on human capital, on education for the current generation could actually be long lasting. Because the big challenge is that at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, 94% of students worldwide were out of school. And were not really, a lot of them were not getting access to even good quality or any quality learning or distance learning. So the big challenge is, as hopefully over the next few months, as economies start reopening, will these children come back to school, or do we face a lost generation, which would be a huge tragedy for all of us. And in higher education, 98% of the total number of tertiary students were affected by the COVID-19 crisis because their institutions were not open. And this equates to about 8.3 million students. That's, if you think about those numbers, these are very, very large numbers. Even with the low enrollment rates, we're talking about a very significant number of students. Now, the move towards remote learning across higher education institutions in sub-Saharan Africa has exposed the digital divide as an additional element of socioeconomic inequity in the region. And if this crisis persists, significant challenges will remain regarding the ability to adapt to new learning environments. So what we think needs to be done in order to respond to some of these challenges are a few things, and I'm going to talk about focusing really on the education system, and what we are trying to do is our approach is summarized in 5 pillars. Ensuring that children are prepared and motivated to learn, so investing in early childhood education. Ensuring teachers are effective and valued, so that teaching becomes a very highly honored profession. Third, guaranteed that classrooms are actually learning spaces that teach at the right level and have effective curriculums. Fourth, education institutions are safe and inclusive spaces, eliminating all types of violence and discrimination. And fifth, education system is well managed, using data to inform teaching and learning. And we also want to have a focus on 3 critical cross-cutting issues. First, on girls, because they're disadvantaged in the region, given cultural norms, economic constraints, demographic issues, and the presence of gender-based violence. So we really want to work a lot on that. Secondly, a focus on fragility, because today half of the children who are out of school in Africa live in conflict-affected countries, and most of them are in Africa. And thirdly, a focus on the use of technologies to find innovative solutions to improve education outcomes using STEM, while mitigating the risk of increased inequality. So what is the bank doing? Just very briefly, I'll talk a couple of minutes. Currently, we have a total of about $7 billion of investment in current projects in Africa, including $1.5 billion in higher education, and another $4 billion for projects currently under preparation. And we are really trying our best to ramp up support to help countries deal with the impact of the COVID crisis, and reopen schools beyond walls so that children can learn both at home and in school. So what we are trying to do is to basically do a needs assessment to understand capacity of higher education systems to respond to crises. And this includes the agricultural higher education system, which we realize is a very important part of higher education, given the huge number of the significant amount of employment in agriculture in the continent. And so we need to really make sure that we keep working on this to improve the productivity of the sector. And we're also trying to build the capacity of tertiary institutions to respond to the crisis, including to accelerate training of nurses, lab technicians, and others, and to lead in digital technologies that can support teaching in primary and secondary schools. We are also trying to work with governments to ensure that students can go back to universities, including through supporting education loans, and ensuring that universities are well funded and professionals do end up getting paid and paid on time. And then very importantly, we really want to, having seen the result of this crisis, we really want to prioritize the whole issue of digital skills and fields that are resilient to crises, not just this crisis, but any other crises that could come in the future, and also building strong public-private partnerships to provide affordable and quality tertiary education. The bank has already invested a lot. I think the video you saw in the beginning about the Africa Centers of Education is something which shows that our work in key priority areas, including science, technology, agriculture, engineering, mathematics, health, industry. We are right now supporting over 70 centers of excellence across Africa, and the results have already been quite impressive in terms of what is coming out of these centers of excellence. And several of these centers have been at the forefront of COVID-19 response, including in rapid testing, contact tracing, disease surveillance, genome sequencing, disease screening, and so on and so forth. So we are really trying our best to up our game, working closely with the countries to do much more on this in this field. And one of the things I'd really like to mention is that partnerships are key. The challenge is so big that we need to create synergies between governments, regional organizations, partners, civil society, and the private sector And I think we have this partnership for skills in applied sciences, engineering, and technology, which we call PASET, which aims to strengthen science and technical capacity of sub-Saharan Africa and build skills across key sectors on the continent. So just to close, I'd like to say that we are very proud to partner with African governments, educational institutions, and regional partners such as RUFOG on innovative initiatives that seek to bring about changes that the continent needs. And we've seen the evidence of this through the series of regional and national projects that we have invested in, where countries have really worked hard to build up their higher education system. We all realize change is a long and hard road, right now made even harder with COVID, but we are there to work with all of you and support you to sustain these changes in the coming years. We know the challenges are not going to be easy, but I think if we all work together, Africa will be very well placed to educate the next generation of scientists, the next generation of farmers and agricultural workers. And we were very proud at the World Bank to be associated with these aspirations and to join the long-term journey on the continent. So with these words, I'd like to stop. Thank you very much again for inviting me. And I look forward to the very, very interesting deliberations in the seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dar. I think we're all inspired and encouraged to hear that the World Bank is putting a lot of effort to mitigate all the challenges that we are now facing, particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm just going to quickly read out two questions here for you before you take off. I hope you've not left.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Okay, please. A question that I have here for you is reads as follows. African governments, including governments of Malawi, Kenya, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Mozambique, based on decisions of African ministers of education, science, and technology, worked together with the World Bank to initiate the Strengthening Higher Agricultural Education in Africa initiative. That's a share. This is very important for agricultural transformation in Africa. The question here is, when will the World Bank operationalize this program? And the other question is, what role can donors and the World Bank play in equipping and connecting the economically weaker students into the digital classroom?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think these are both very good questions. On SHE, I think we are right now in the process of trying to work with our various country colleagues and having dialogue with various governments to see which governments are the most interested in investing in agricultural education in the first phase. So we are hopeful that in the coming months, we'll be able to proceed effectively and develop this. So we are looking forward to that. And we will keep you fully appraised of that. On the second question on digital skills, I think we've all realized, and I think the COVID crisis unfortunately has brought it to the fore, that we really need to be much more moving much faster in terms of digitizing. And I'm not just talking about the higher education institutions, all the way from primary education, so that children, and all children, not just the children of the rich, but all children can actually have access to distance educational opportunities and using digital tools in the future, because we realize that, a crisis such as this, we hope it doesn't happen again for a long time, but you never know. And so I think the more we invest in digital skills, the better. Now, the World Bank has, the education team as well as the digital team are already working very closely together on a program on digitalization of higher education in Africa. And we are very much looking forward to joining up with what the governments are doing and what other development partners are doing, because in the end, whatever we do on our own is not going to be enough to actually reach all the children in Africa. So this is one thing we will be working very hard on. We are already in discussion with governments as well as other partners who we would hope are interested in coming in and supporting the governments and us in really moving this agenda forward very rapidly, because we realize that this is a crisis which if we were much more digitized, we would probably be in a better position to handle on the education side. So clearly this is a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll let you go now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Once
It's a
more, thank
pleasure
you.
to be
Thank,
here.
there are other questions that I see coming in for you, but
I will actually follow up and answer them separately, but thank you very much for the invitation.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at the time we started, there were some technical hitches, and you may not have heard me introduce one of our honorable speakers. And so let me just do that once more. That is Honorable Professor Dr. Eleanor Ladikan Yayi, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research from the Republic of Benin. Honorable, you are welcome. So now we are quickly going to move to the next speaker. And she was actually supposed to have been the first to set the stage for our discussion. So I'm very honored to invite Her Excellency, Professor Sarah Anyang Agbo, Commissioner for Human Resources, Science and Technology, African Union Commission, and formerly the Deputy Vice Chancellor, who worked very closely with me. I cannot help not saying that. So Professor, Your Excellency, welcome. Please, can you unmute? Can you unmute? Unmute your microphone. Your Excellency, we cannot hear you.
Yes, ma. I don't know what has happened. Technology has failed me, ma, VC.
No,
we
can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay, ma. We formally called Professor Teresa Akenji, ma, VC, at the University of Bamenda, and it was a very huge pleasure for me to work with her because she actually also mentored me. So I stand on existing protocols. I recognize the presence of our distinguished panelists, Honorable Excellencies from Uganda, from Zambia, from Cotonou, Benin, and from Windhoek, Namibia. Excellency from Namibia, I hope we will still host the World Skills in November, World Skills Africa in November. And I also want to recognize the distinguished Professor Adipala. Thank you for the work you do in RUFORUM and all the RUFORUM team. I was asked specific questions, so I'm going to address those questions, and I will be very brief in addressing them to keep to the 10 minutes. The theme is education from foundations and skills to advancements in science, technology, and innovation, considering fundamentals for transforming Africa. Now, my first topic is, how does Africa eliminate the learning poverty using homegrown approaches that are tuned to the political realities of each country, sociocultural realities, national and regional growth disparities, as well as historical injustice? Now, what are the key initiatives of the African Union Commission level for strengthening education, science, technology in Africa? what additional measures need to be put in place in light of the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic, and how is the African Union Commission engaging African member states in putting in place response measures. The African Union Commission has implemented continental initiatives such as the Innovation Education in Africa Expo, which seeks to identify, strengthen, and promote homegrown education solutions to systematically and sustainably address the gaps in Africa's education system. Over 70 outstanding innovations have been identified through this initiative since inception in 2018, and these have been supported through the promotion efforts of the African Union and provision of up to 300,000 USD in grants. The study on training, working, and living conditions of teachers in Africa was conducted in 2016 following the decision of African Union heads of state and government. Among the key underpinnings of the study was the need to elevate the teaching profession in Africa as a catalyst for realizing the continental education agenda. In this wise, last year, 2019, we had the Specialized Technical Committee on Education, Science, and Technology, which the ministers from Namibia, the minister from Uganda were all present, and they are actually members of the STC board. And we also adopted the minimum package that we refer to as DOTS, connecting the dots, where D stands for digital information and skills, where O stands for online teaching, T for teacher training professional, and then S for safety online and offline, and another S for skills initiative. The African Union Teacher Prize was therefore established in 2019 to honor continentally distinguished teachers and promote their exemplary service. It is often said that the teacher's reward is in heaven, but the prize also includes a 10,000 USD for winning teachers, 10 of them from 5 regions of Africa. The African Union Commission, in collaboration with UNICEF, issued a joint statement to member states on the 30th of March 2020 to emphasize the importance of continuing education through alternative methods, sharing and learning from best practices, and planning for the safe reopening of schools. The importance of preserving education during COVID-19 was further underscored by African ministers of education during their extraordinary virtual session of the Specialized Technical Committee on Education, Science, and Technology held on 30th April 2020. Our member states are being offered support in the provision of online and offline education while schools are closed through partnerships with development partners, including HP and Pro Futuro. The Be Online initiative with HP provides a free of charge best-in-class online learning management system and technical support for migrating teachers and learners to the platform. The collaboration with Pro Futuro is providing an equally effective learning management system which runs offline, taking into account the connectivity challenges faced in Africa. My second question is, how does Africa eliminate the learning poverty using homegrown approaches that are tuned to the political realities of each country, sociocultural realities, national and regional growth disparities? At the African Union, we are fully aware that education is the most important tool for equipping African people with the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be able to drive these aspirations that make up the African Union vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own competent citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Quality education is imperative if Africa has to attain this vision, generate homegrown solutions to African challenges, and participate fully in and influence the global knowledge economy. This is the importance of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016-2025 that speaks to all areas of education. The African Union has therefore made several technical and policy level incursions into realizing the opportunity and challenge presented by digitization across sectors. including in education and skills development for children and youth. The Continental Education Story for Africa identifies ICT in education as a major lever for promoting access, quality, impact, and inclusion, as well as a skill set for life, work, and further education. The Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa 2020-2030 provides a roadmap for leveraging partnerships and resources to increase connectivity on the continent as a backbone for innovations in delivery and management of education. The ministers agreed that for us to achieve remote learning in Africa, we need to bridge the digital divide as well as have green energy to promote learning in rural and remote places. At the higher education level, the African Union established the Pan-African Virtual and E-University, which was launched in December 2020 as a strategy to expand access while focusing on critical areas such as IT and entrepreneurship. My third question that I'm to respond to is, from the education, science, technology, and innovation sector perspectives, what are some of the key elements being considered at the European Union, African Union policy dialogue? How could African universities and their networks contribute to the policy development and implementation of the framework? The African Union, European Union Partnership on Higher Education is aimed at providing the framework and mechanisms for harmonization of higher education, quality assurance, and accreditation in Africa. Under this partnership, the African Union Commission implementing several programs, including the African Continental Qualification Framework. Secondly, the harmonization of African higher education, quality assurance, and accreditation. Thirdly, intra-African academic mobility scheme. And finally, the African Students and Alumni Forum. Moreover, the African Continental Qualification Framework is a policy instrument whose implementation is intended to enhance comparability, quality, and transparency of qualifications from all subsectors and levels of education and training in Africa. The African Continental Qualification Framework is part of the larger Skills Initiative for Africa program, with ETF providing technical lead for its development. The focus areas of the African Continental Qualification Framework development are the mapping study, the feasibility study, and the development of African Continental Qualification Framework policy and technical document and a plan of action. Moreover, the harmonization of African higher education quality assurance and accreditation initiative aims to improve quality and harmonization of African higher education and support students' employability and mobility across the continent. It also aims at strengthening the capacities of quality assurance agencies to implement the African standards and guidelines for quality assurance and cross-regional cooperation to implement the Pan-African Quality Assurance and Accreditation Framework. Other priorities include promotion of African quality rating mechanism as an African tool for institutional quality assessment and improvement, and set up of the Pan-African Quality Assurance and Accreditation Agency, and the implementation of transversal actions, including training, media campaigns, and synergies and coordination with other donors and partners. The intra-Africa academic mobility schemes general objective is to provide mobility scholarships to postgraduate students and staff and enhance intra-African collaboration of higher education institutions. Among the key priorities are building of partnerships of 4 to 6 African higher education institutions, organize mobility flows within Africa, and offer scholarships to master's and doctoral candidates, teaching and administrative staff. The African Students and Alumni Forum has also been established to promote young people's participation in educational processes and increase synergies between students and alumni networks as an informal platform for engagement. The African Students An alumni forum is a developing platform offering opportunities for exchange, collaboration, and capacity building to African beneficiaries of international mobility scholarship funded by the European Union. Indeed, education from foundations and skills to advancement in science, technology, and innovation, considering fundamentals for transforming Africa, is a very important topic, particularly in these unprecedented times. We believe that, according to the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, that early childhood education and teacher training, higher education, STEM for girls, and ICT will move this continent to the Africa we want. If we want an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, then there is need for us to advance science, technology, and innovation in order to transform Africa, which we commonly refer to the Africa we want. So these are my responses to the questions that I was asked, and I've tried to keep the 10 minutes. Thank you, Ma.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Yes, indeed, you have touched on many key issues, and I like the strategy encouraging us to generate homegrown remedies to address educational challenges, and of course, early childhood training. When you look in the question and answer box, there are several questions that have come in there for you.
Okay,
So
I don't know what has happened to my technology. I cannot expand my box. Let me see.
Okay, I'm hoping that maybe the technical team will help you on that, but there are questions there for you. If you can't get to them at the end, when we get to that particular session, I'll read some of them out
for
you to answer. So thank you very much. We now move to our next speaker, and I am pleased you can see them now.
Yes.
Okay.
It's technology.
Okay. Yes, and I just want to remind participants, please don't ask questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
Write your questions in the question and answer box, please. All right.
Okay. So I have seen the questions.
All right. So you can just type your answers.
Okay. Is biotechnology projected also to the restoration, protection, and propagation?
We're just, Your Excellency, we're going to continue with the presentations, but you can just, get
the answers ready.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
So I invite our next speaker, Honorable Dr. Eluide. No, he's not here. Honorable Dr. Ita Kanji Morangi, Minister of Higher Education and Training of the government of Namibia. Honorable Minister, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Director of Ceremonies this afternoon, Vice Chancellor. I think to start my comments and remarks, I would like to send a word of gratitude to Ruforum and the leadership for inviting me and indeed hosting this important session. Your Excellency, Professor Anna Anyang Agbo, the Commissioner for Human Resources, Science and Technology, AU, and honorable ministers present from different countries on our continent. The advent of COVID-19 has necessitated the need for stronger and well-integrated, responsive and resilient education systems if Africa must achieve greater efficiency in addressing societal challenges. The need for a bold and collective action across African universities and education system is an imperative now more than ever before. Therefore, this webinar is an excellent platform to address not only academic discourse, but to take stock of some continental milestones, as well as education and societal aspects that are of concern. and identify areas where challenges still exist. However, the platform offers a collective voice for the development and advancement of education systems across the continent for generations to come. Our continent is facing unprecedented societal challenges compounded by COVID-19, while the advent of artificial intelligence will impact all of us. Education institutions tasked with STEM responsibilities need to be abreast of global developments in learning such as distance, digitalized lifelong learning, student-centered approaches, and micro credentials as they are related to the world of work. Moreover, our institutions need to consider changing dynamics in research, such as open science, global virtual laboratories, data-driven research, and integrity assurance. Education institutions can play a greater role in the development of innovation through deeper partnerships with businesses, cultural, civic, and public actors. Education institutions can also advance science, technology, and innovation development through deeper and more meaningful valorization of abundant natural resources on the African continent. Higher education institutions must prudently exemplify the transformational role of universities in societies, including the implementation of the SDGs. On the principle of African solidarity, we must support each other to participate in global research initiatives in a competitive way through proactive engagement in mentorships and partnerships by those with stronger research performance. Higher education institutions should focus on lasting legacies rather than short-term gains. Prominence of higher education should be merited on quality, resilience, agility, and adapting to changing social conditions with a strong character focus on achieving a historical mission to emancipate Africans. I think now to focus on the main question, how may African public and private education institutions play a leading role in driving science, technology, and innovation capacity development adaptive to the realities of the fourth industrial revolution to catalyze the continent's competitiveness? While the fourth industrial revolution may be disruptive to many occupations, it is also projected to create a wide range of new jobs in fields such as STEM, data analytics, computer science, and engineering. There will be strong demand for professionals who can blend digital and STEM skills with traditional subject expertise, such as digital mechanical engineering or engineers and business operational data analysts, who combine deep knowledge of their industry with the latest analytical tools to quickly adapt business strategies. There will also be more demand for user interface experts who can facilitate seamless human-machine interaction. For sub-Saharan Africa, the greatest long-term benefit of such jobs are likely to be found in the promotion of homegrown African digital creators, designers, and makers, not just digital deliverers. A recent World Economic Forum research on realizing human potential in the fourth industrial revolution, developed through in-depth consultation with leading experts and practitioners, recommended a number of levers for creating strong education and systems, including the following. One, expanded access to early childhood. 2, ensuring the future readiness of curricula. 3, investing in developing and maintaining a professionalized teaching workforce. 4, early exposure to the workplace and career guidance. 5, investing in digital fluency and ICT literacy skills. And 6, providing robust and respected technical and vocational education and training. Although there is no formal list of the fourth industrial revolution technologies, below are short description of some of those that are most potentially impactful emerging technologies. The big data cloud computing, the Internet of Things, the 3D printing, the artificial intelligence, and indeed the blockchain. All these are essential and critical types of technologies that within our different education systems, particularly at higher education, we need to ensure that they find inroads in our curricula. The need for higher education to respond is urgent, as the power of the fourth industrial revolution technologies for either positive social impacts or devastating environmental damage is upon us. There is the potential for irreversible loss of control over networks of powerful artificial intelligence agents with increasing autonomy within financial sectors and within urban infrastructure. Substantial changes to the science and technology curriculum will be required to allow for students to develop capacity in the rapidly emerging areas of genomics, data science, artificial intelligence, robotics, and nanomaterials. Such a fourth industrial revolution curriculum would reconsider the curriculum within the traditional primary sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, and place a higher premium for training in computer science subjects as a form of the fourth industrial revolution literacy. Within biology, new approaches might include training within introductory courses to discuss emerging areas such as synthetic biology and molecular design. What exactly am I saying? What are the initiatives that are there to help us leapfrog and probably begin to reap benefits from some of these important areas? I think you will agree with me, Comrade Chair, that human capital remains a vital indicator in an economy to measure skills development. Despite Namibia spending 2/3 of its total budget on the education sector, the country's performance on skills development is still not satisfactory. And I believe this is not unique to Namibia. There are many possible initiatives. However, at the continental level, it is perhaps of paramount importance that we find instruments that will facilitate the growth of a common African identity in the STEM fields. Such a common identity predicated on high quality STEM focus could be achieved considering the following initiatives. 1, Africa should endeavor to support and promote the mobility of students and staff across our multicultural, multilingual education systems. 2, a continental research policy framework should restore the pride and esteem of African scientists and restore parity of esteem between learning and research. 3, our academic programs should be smart, decolonized, innovative, and should produce graduates whose attributes are fit for current and future labor markets. 4, there is a need for the harmonization of quality at different levels of education, institutions, systems, units, and operational quality within organizations. For example, regional qualification assurance bodies and continental initiatives such as the Pan-African Quality Assurance Framework, harmonization of African higher education quality assurance and accreditation initiative, under which the African standards and guidelines of QA in higher education, all this need strengthening. Africa needs to strengthen knowledge creation systems, innovation, and capacity and provision of high-speed and accessible communication patterns. Finally, the fundamental purpose of African universities must be to create knowledge and build skills, complement, sustained over generations. Collectively, we should uphold the value that define our rich African culture and build universities that are competent to invent, inspire, teach, and train as a primary civic responsibility and service to society. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. You've given us a lot of food for thought. Indeed, higher education should focus on long-time legacies rather than short-term gains. I like that very much. And of course, there must be changes in the science and technology curriculum to allow students to develop the pertinent skills that we are talking about. That was indeed very enriching, and I'm sure you'll be having quite a few questions when we come to the question and answer session. Once more, thank you very much. We now move to our next presenter, and I will invite Honorable Professor Dr. Eleanor Ladikan Yayi, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research from the Republic of Benin. Honorable Minister, will now listen to you.
No, yes.
Bonjour. J'espère que vous m'entendez.
Oui.
Très bien. OK, très bien. Je voudrais également, à mon tour, je suis Éléonore Yayi Ladekan, ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur de la Recherche scientifique du Bénin dans le gouvernement de Son Excellence le Président Patrice Talon. Et donc, j'étais précédemment vice-recteur chargé de la coopération avant d'être ministre. Et c'est avec un réel plaisir qu'à la suite de mes prédécesseurs, je voudrais également saluer cette initiative et cette opportunité que me donne donc Ruforum avec son secrétaire exécutif, professeur Adi Pala, et tout le conseil d'administration du Ruforum qui, la dernière fois, au cours d'un échange, m'a parlé donc de ce webinaire, et c'est avec un grand plaisir que j'ai accepté donc pouvoir partager les expériences au niveau du Bénin. Je voudrais également saluer Madame la commissaire donc de l'Union africaine en charge des ressources humaines, que j'apprécie beaucoup puisque nous sommes vus un certain nombre de fois. Et la dernière fois également, j'ai pris une part intéressante dans la réunion en ligne qui avait été convoquée avec l'Union européenne. Donc, je voudrais vous remercier, Madame la commissaire, pour tout ce que vous faites en termes d'action pour mettre réellement les États ensemble pour trouver des solutions aux problèmes qui se posent au monde entier. Et à vous, évidemment, Madame la modératrice, pour cette façon dont vous modérez donc, cette rencontre afin que chacun puisse exprimer un peu et présenter ses expériences. Alors, pour ce qui me concerne, je voudrais également saluer mes chers collègues donc, des autres pays et que je découvre parce que ces occasions nous permettent également de nous découvrir. Donc, c'est un réel plaisir pour moi de faire leur connaissance en ligne en attendant de pouvoir nous retrouver donc, physiquement autour d'autres actions. Pour ce webinaire, 4 questions m'ont été posées. Et donc, la première question, c'est donc l'impact de la COVID-19 sur le secteur de l'éducation au Bénin et les mesures prises par le gouvernement en réponse donc, de la pandémie. Alors, donc, pour cette question, il faut reconnaître que aucun État n'a été donc épargné des perturbations de Covid. Et le Bénin également a subi un certain nombre de perturbations, surtout pour le système éducatif. Et nous devons quand même reconnaître toute l'intervention de nos partenaires, à savoir la Banque mondiale qui, effectivement, je confirme ce qu'il a dit, a mené un certain nombre d'actions aux côtés des États pour soutenir donc, la mise en commun donc, des apprenants et des enseignants. Et il y a également UNESCO, il y a également un certain nombre de partenaires, donc l'AFD, qui nous ont soutenus. Je ne veux pas les citer pour ne pas faire commettre l'erreur d'en oublier et donc d'égratigner les partenaires. Dans l'ensemble, nous, le Bénin a reçu quand même un certain nombre d'appuis techniques des partenaires pour soutenir son programme. Le Bénin donc a pris un certain nombre de mesures. Il y a les mesures générales qui consistent déjà à protéger donc les populations de façon globale, mais de façon spécifique pour ce qui concerne le secteur de l'éducation. Au niveau des 3 ordres d'enseignement, le gouvernement de son excellent, le président Patrice Talon, a pris les taureaux vraiment par les cornes en mettant en place une plateforme de e-learning, par exemple, au niveau du supérieur, pour permettre aux étudiants de continuer à suivre les cours en ligne avec les enseignants. Et cela a beaucoup marché et cela a permis donc de finir le 2e semestre parce que disons qu'on a déjà exécuté les programmes à 30% avant que le confinement général au niveau du secteur de l'éducation n'intervienne. Donc, la mise en place de cette plateforme a été salutaire au niveau du supérieur et cela a concerné aussi bien donc, le public que le privé. Donc, comment on appelle ça, les cours qui se font donc sans paiement. Le début était un peu difficile puisque les étudiants devraient chercher la connexion et cela créait un petit problème. Ils n'arrivaient toujours pas à suivre. Mais par la suite, cela a été corrigé et cela a été donc gratuit pour les étudiants. Il y a également que les autres niveaux d'enseignement tels que le secondaire et le primaire ont eu à poursuivre leurs activités à travers des radios, par exemple locales, pour leur permettre d'écouter et de suivre les cours qui se font. Et je pourrais dire avec beaucoup, beaucoup de bonheur et de fierté que tous les examens nationaux ont été donc passés. Le dernier, c'est l'examen du bac pour lequel nous avons fait la première délibération hier seulement. Et ça a été vraiment la joie totale de tous les parents de voir que cette année, malgré Covid, n'a pas été une année perdue pour les parents ni pour les apprenants. Donc, ça, c'est ce que le gouvernement a dû faire pour permettre donc, la continuité éducative au niveau donc, du secteur de l'éducation. Et le gouvernement a pris d'autres mesures, évidemment, pour ce qui concerne les autres secteurs économiques tels que l'agriculture, l'artisanat, tous ceux qui participent à la richesse donc économique ont été soutenus d'une façon à travers des crédits qui leur ont été octroyés pour la relance progressive de leurs activités. Cela a été véritablement reconnu et salué par les différents acteurs. Au niveau des universités, vous voyez, le gouvernement a apporté pour lui, mais les universités également ont contribué. Nous avons donc découvert un certain nombre d'initiatives spontanées au niveau des universités. Par exemple, les laboratoires qui eux-mêmes ont produit des gels déjà pour se laver les mains, pour se préserver, et donc cela a été formidable. Même dans certaines entités, nous avons connu la fabrication donc des dispositifs de lavage des mains. Et ça a permis aux universités de ne pas attendre nécessairement tout le gouvernement avant de protéger leurs différentes couches estudiantines. Alors ça, c'est ce que je pourrais dire pour ce qui concerne un peu les mesures pour la pandémie. Et le gouvernement continue donc de soutenir cela. La plateforme est devenue une réalité. Cela permet donc de révolutionner notre système donc, éducatif. Donc, désormais, la digitalisation de nos enseignements devient chose réelle. Et nous sommes en train de proposer un projet de restructuration donc, de l'enseignement supérieur pour tenir compte donc, de ces différents changements. Nous pouvons donc dire que COVID-19 est venu, mais COVID-19 a permis de déceler un certain nombre de savoirs endogènes et de valeurs au niveau aussi bien des apprenants que des structures de recherche. Les difficultés, c'est justement l'existence d'une plateforme technique d'interaction. Il n'y a pas de plateau technique fort. Donc, c'est ce qui constitue pour le moment et donc un grand défi que nous allons devoir prendre en compte pour aider les universités à continuer de rendre leur mission qui est le service à la communauté. La deuxième question qui m'a été posée, c'est comment la recherche peut-elle donc contribuer à renforcer l'état de préparation de l'Afrique aux pandémies émergentes telles que la COVID-19 et d'autres à l'avenir. Bon, cela rejoint bel et bien les interventions passées, c'est-à-dire que la recherche, bien sûr, va continuer à jouer son rôle à travers la mise en place d'une veille épidémiologique pour éviter que nous ne soyons surpris de cette façon-là. Et il y a également à vulgariser, en deuxième point, à vulgariser donc le concept de One Health développé par l'OMS et les autres organisations. En trois, la mise en place des réseaux thématiques régionaux et internationaux. Au niveau du Bénin, il y a les comités, par exemple, des experts et qui sont pluridisciplinaires. Donc, si ces comités d'experts à l'échelle régionale eh bien, se remettent ensemble avec les autres pays, nous pourrions former une chaîne donc, de valeur. La recherche en équipe pluridisciplinaire et transdisciplinaire constitue également des axes à renforcer pour préparer l'Afrique à lutter contre cette pandémie et d'autres qui pourraient arriver. Il faut, comme je viens de le dire tantôt, valoriser les savoirs endogènes parce que nous considérons qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui sont encore détenues par les tradipraticiens, par les docteurs endogènes et nous devons développer donc un certain nombre de formations à leur encontre pour ce qui concerne leur intervention et développer le partenariat avec la médecine conventionnelle. Pour ce qui concerne la question 3, c'est de notre point de vue, quelles mesures devraient être prises dans les universités africaines pour développer les capacités pertinentes pour le continent. Et l'autre sous-question, c'est quelles initiatives régionales pourraient être envisagées dans ce contexte. Eh bien, pour ce qui concerne les universités africaines, ce qui serait envisageable, c'est de pouvoir penser à la mise en place des conditions de base pour transformer les universités existantes, pour créer donc des universités de développement. Il faut penser en point 2 à la formation basée sur les besoins réels des pays, de la région et de l'Afrique. Donc, mettre en place des curricula de formation qui soient, disons, en adéquation avec les besoins nationaux, régionaux et internationaux. Cela permet de former donc des diplômés qui n'auront pas de difficulté à s'insérer ou à prendre leur part de contribution dans l'économie du pays. La prise en compte de l'entrepreneuriat dans les formations qualifiantes et diplômantes. Donc, un certain nombre d'aspects qui ont été déjà abordés tout à l'heure par mes prédécesseurs. Mais pour ce qui concerne les initiatives régionales qui pourraient être envisagées, il faut continuer de travailler en étroite collaboration avec les universités africaines et d'autres partenaires pour développer et fournir un enseignement scientifique par le biais de webinaires sur tout le continent. C'est-à-dire les initiatives du genre qui nous mettent ensemble ne doivent pas être les seules logées juste pour gérer la crise sanitaire. Elles doivent être renforcées, même rendre durables, pérennisées pour permettre aux différentes équipes de pouvoir partager donc leur expérience. Il faut encourager donc l'apprentissage à distance et en ligne comme une stratégie d'atténuation dans les pays membres de l'université virtuelle africaine. Il faudrait absolument renforcer cet échange en ligne et permettre la formation aussi bien des formateurs que des apprenants. La plateforme, par exemple, de e-learning que nous avons mis en place nous a permis de déceler que même les enseignants, les formateurs n'ont pas encore toutes les qualifications nécessaires pour pouvoir les utiliser. Donc, c'est une nouvelle révolution et il faut penser à former les formateurs dedans. Nous pensons également qu'il faut améliorer la connectivité numérique dans les pays africains et la décentraliser vers les régions éloignées et donner la priorité aux investissements dans l'infrastructure Internet parce que la connectivité demeure encore un grand défi. Nous avons mis en place la plateforme, mais il y a des régions qui ne sont pas totalement couvertes où la connectivité pose problème. Cela accentue d'une façon donc les inégalités. Or, il faut dans les actions faire en sorte que les inégalités soient réduites. Donc, nous devons faire en sorte que les différentes zones soient bien couvertes pour permettre cette transmission donc, de l'action éducative entre les apprenants et les enseignants. La quatrième et dernière question, c'est quel devrait être le rôle des organisations africaines comme l'AUIA, le RUFORUM, CAMES, pour élever la pertinence des universités pour les besoins de développement de l'Afrique et quelles mesures ou appuis devraient être mis en place par les gouvernements africains et la Commission de l'Union africaine. Ça, c'est une question très importante et je voudrais déjà mettre un accent particulier sur déjà ce que fait le RUFORUM au niveau de nos différents États. Lorsque nous voyons le RUFORUM qui permet justement de rapprocher les laboratoires dans ce qui s'en fait, de donner les bourses aux jeunes, de permettre aux jeunes d'aller acquérir du savoir et de venir les investir dans leur pays, nous pensons que les initiatives comme ça sont à encourager. Donc, le rôle des organisations telles que celles que j'ai citées tout à l'heure serait d'être les chefs d'orchestre pour coordonner et harmoniser les efforts qui se font dans les universités en matière d'académie et de recherche universitaire. Les universités travaillent, mais il faut toujours qu'il y ait de ces instances-là pour fédérer les actions qui se déroulent un peu partout dans les universités. Il faudrait continuer de donner l'appui aux universités et les structures de recherche en logistique, en formation, en ressources pour l'exécution des programmes fédérateurs et veiller à ce que les universités soient renforcées dans ce que nous pouvons appeler les alumni des universités. Il y a les associations des alumni qui devraient pouvoir jouer un rôle important. Ils existent, mais pour le moment, c'est mal utilisé et nous pensons que les organisations devraient pouvoir nous aider à renforcer la mise en place de ces alumni. Voilà un peu les 4 questions qui m'ont été posées et c'est avec beaucoup de plaisir que je prends part à cela pour répondre aux différentes questions qui me seront également posées. Encore une fois, merci à vous et merci de nous avoir écoutés.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Yai. You have indeed addressed all the questions and very clearly. The e-learning platform that your government has set up to help mitigate the lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic is commendable. You are going to have a lot of questions on that. I've seen them already. I'm sorry, I forgot to go back to English. I was just thanking Minister Yai for her presentation, for addressing the ways in which Benin mitigated the education impacts of the pandemic. I was just telling the Honorable Minister that there are lots of questions that I see in the question and answer box that's addressing some of the issues that she raised. I see the same too for our Honorable Minister from Namibia. You have a lot of questions there in the question and answer box. And of course, Your Excellency, Professor Agbo, there are lots of questions there too for you. So please, if you can start addressing those questions so that when we get to the question and answer session, most of them would have been tackled. Thank you. And so we are going to move to our last panelist before the discussant comes in. And so I invite the Honorable Minister, Brian Mushimba, Minister of Higher Education, Lusaka, Zambia. Honorable, please, we'll now listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start by expressing my sincere appreciation for having been invited to participate at this very important forum. Let me also take this opportunity to greet my fellow ministers on the panel and other distinguished panelists from the AUC and the World Bank. The discussion points that I have, several of them. I think the first one that I'd like to speak to, the discussion on how we can ensure a meaningful transition across the educational value chain, from primary education or lower level education, all the way through to university education. And I'd like to start by saying that indeed for us to achieve the Africa that we want, as espoused in the Agenda 2063, we certainly have to have a robust and a well-connected education system. It's critical and should be a key building block. As Africa and African countries, we strongly have to have this commitment that the education systems that we are superintending over are holistic, they're relevant, and all the reforms that we should be looking at should encompass the entire educational value chain. We are doing this in Zambia as I speak. Without a well-educated population, I think we all know, the challenges that comes with that. And I feel that the ministers of education in Africa have a big responsibility because the knowledge economies require that, we all, not just acquire basic education, but, we go beyond that. For industrialization to take place, for fair trade to take place, for us to build the health infrastructure, for us to take advantage of the opportunities in agriculture. All these sectors desire that we have people that are specialized and they have the detailed special skills and continue to develop those skills. And that only comes through the education system and the education value chain that we are superintending over. I firmly believe that to create this transition or the reform that looks at education system as a whole, and to make our education systems as relevant as we need them to speak to the knowledge economy I was speaking to, and help our economic development agendas across Africa, we as ministers superintending over education really must be very alert, network as we are doing today, discuss these matters, learn from each other, and dig in so that we oversee, the transition and the reforms in our education system to speak to what we desire. There's need for Africa to confront the challenges and barriers that hinder learning from transitioning in the education value chain, leading to high dropout rates. This is something that in Zambia we're dealing with. There's quite a high number of dropouts from each stage of the education value chain. And we're seriously trying to look into how we stop that. If it's a girl child, how we make sure that the girl child stays in school. Avoid early marriages and early pregnancies. And there's targeted interventions that we are speaking to in Zambia right now. Some of the challenges certainly include the limited support and limited human resources to intervene. We found this as we were interrogating some of these dropout rates ourselves. So we therefore need to use some of the interventions that have proved to be successful. Our domestic policies need to encompass regional strategies and learn from each other and from the SADC, from the EAC, ECOWAS, so we can design and implement well thought out converged education policies and strategies, which should ensure that our learners from different countries, from different regions, can achieve what we must achieve as a continent. This will mean that if we even have a graduate from one country they can go and do university in another country, or they have a degree from one country, they can actually go and work in another country without much difficulty. Teaching of learners in subjects like science and engineering, must also begin early in our primary education. Unlike the way, sometimes we think that learning of science and math can start once someone is in secondary school, when they go to a teacher's training college. I think in Zambia, we are deliberately rolling out STEM schools in lower education grades to make sure that we start cultivating the interest in our children early on, because learning science, math, and engineering, I think, has to start early on, and we cultivate that interest in our children early on. We can then use the efficiencies that the region the regional bloc can have, to help the continent education system that can provide the equal opportunities for learners and professional practitioners across the continent. The second question that I have has to do with the achieving of greater efficiency and better outcomes in building skills for today's workforce and tomorrow's labor market. This is also relevant, especially for us in the sector, because productivity will grow our economies, will improve our livelihoods, will improve our competitiveness, and certainly deepen engagement between all players in the value chain. We have to again speak to the entire education value chain here as we are addressing this issue. The value chain all the way from primary, secondary, and tertiary education. And the primary focus as we engage should be first to have a clear understanding, certainly, of the required skills in each of our economies and at what level. Africa needs to focus its effort in developing skills that are applicable among its citizens. I think our economies may be different, our skill set may be slightly different. So I think this is speaking to the uniqueness of each country, each region, while developing broader skills. There has to be, that also has to be, the uniqueness has to be taken into account. For the level of the economies in the continent, there is a great need for hands-on technical skills. This has been proven. We are starting to want to make things ourselves as Africa. So the manufacturing sector is going to be key. Many of those artisanal skills, hands-on skills will be required. In Zambia, we've transitioned our education system at higher learning. Our universities moved from a bursary scheme to loan scheme. Students take loans and then they have to pay back when they graduate. But at our tertiary, at our college level, at our TVET level, we have continued a bursary scheme. And the reason we have done that is recognizing that we need a cadre of citizens that have hands-on, practical, technical, artisanal skills that are required at manufacturing shop floors, be it an electrician, a bricklayer, or any of these. And we want to continue giving those bursaries for now to make sure that we incentivize our students to do this, because we understand as a continent, as a country, we need these skills and need them in bulk. There are a lot of young people also that once they go through this training, artisanal skills training, TVET training, college training, they get lifelong skills, certainly, and some of them don't even need to look for work. They employ themselves because there's a huge need for these hands-on skills. Once such kind of skills are developed, I think many of our economies will benefit from them. The skills audit that I spoke about to see what you need, how to develop it, I think has to be taken very, very seriously, and it's very important, and it's a key input in how you want to design, a training program that speaks to developing the skills that are required for your economies. And these skills audits certainly can't be done just by government. I think in Zambia, we've engaged multiple stakeholders. Government has a role to play, but also other partners in the education sector come on board. Government, the biggest role government played, especially for Zambia, is the creation of the environment that also provides the necessary incentives for even investment in education. We having different success stories from this environment, but we've committed that as government to just make sure that we'll continue to learn from others through regional interactions such as this, to make sure that we can do better in creating that environment so that government can be helped in creating this cadre of educated citizenry that can play a critical role in the economy and build a lot of STEM and ICT capacity among citizens. The third item that I was asked to speak to is in relation to the facilitation and achievement of Africa Union's Agenda 2063, entrenching science, technology, and innovation in our higher education systems. I think I've touched on this even as I was speaking to the other topics, and the criticality of this has been highlighted, where social transformation, economic competitiveness can only be achieved through the development of this human capital, value addition to all the activities that we're doing in country, the industrialization agenda that should be anchored on entrepreneurship, especially when the citizens have all the skills that we spoke about. For us to sustainably achieve this, there's need certainly for deliberate effort in enhancing investments also in our universities through partnerships with the private sector, so that we can increase private investment in both public and private higher learning institutions. The ultimate and biggest consumers of the knowledge and skills developed in our education system are the private enterprises. Therefore, they need to come on board and provide some funding towards research and development, increase the uptake and commercialization of innovative ideas that are coming from research in the universities, so that the whole system can benefit from this. Both public and private universities need to enhance and broaden their programs at master's and PhD degree levels. We still send a lot of African students out of the continent for their further studies, and thus their research topics sometimes do not address the continent problems. I was listening to a young man from the Gambia who was speaking about why he turned down going to learn in London or the Americas, and he chose to want to learn in Rwanda. And the biggest point he made is this, that learning is not just a classroom, it's also the environment that you're learning in. It's how the environment and the culture around where you're learning is addressing issues and challenges that they face. Many of these challenges are unique. So if you're in Canada, you're probably going to be exposed to Canada's unique challenges, and you learn on that. But then you come home to the Gambia, to Zambia, to Congo DRC, and the terrain is different. So your education tends to be irrelevant, for lack of better words. So we need to then find a way that we started training more of our students versus sending them abroad. African universities should also be made to be accountable for the research and development. You know, they do not only exist to graduate students, the universities, through teaching and learning, but to conduct research. And this is something that we are speaking to loudly in Zambia, that our universities should take more interest in this and do relevant research that speaks to the unique problems in the country, so we can come up with unique solutions in the country. The fourth item that was asked of me to speak to is the COVID-19 pandemic, how it has disrupted the education system, and how we are getting through this. You know, on the continent, most of the schools, especially higher education institutions, you know, get financing from, you know, the students being on campus and government providing grants. And when COVID came and hit all sectors, including the education sector, this has meant closure of universities, colleges, and it's uncertain when normalcy will return. But as you can see, the financial stress that this is going to cause on our sector needs to really be looked into and address it. And to respond both in the short term and the long term, short term during the COVID pandemic and long term post-COVID pandemic, I think governments will be required to design and implement measures that will provide financial relief to these institutions through stimulus packages. Some countries have already been proposing the establishment of strategic emergency fund portfolios. Some are issuing COVID bonds to raise finances from private sector. These measures would go a long way, certainly, in mitigating the financial challenges brought on by the pandemic. However, the reality is that economies on the continent are already stretched. You know, so because of that, and we've known that the financial, as you know, the financial resources have been inadequate. This poses even further challenges for us on the continent. There's a need for a coalition of partners, certainly from the private and public institutions, to assist African governments to finance the establishment of learning systems, therefore, you know, that can help during this period. And listening to the previous speaker, I think they spoke to this very, very well and ably. And I think this is something that we all need to pay attention to, that we create a system of learning using ICTs that can be robust, you know, cost conscious, and save some of the resources. And also we continue learning even during and post the COVID. In a publication that was titled COVID-19 and Higher Education Today and Tomorrow, it was published recently by UNESCO. It has predicted that COVID pandemic will be with us and its impact will be felt for a while. This means besides mobilizing financial resources for the sector, we need to focus on implementing measures that safeguard operations and credibility of the education system. And this, I'm sure many of us are doing at various levels, and we can continue so that we adopt the e-platforms, we adopt virtual learning, we retrain our teachers and lecturers to make sure that they're able to operate in virtual environments, utilizing technology, best teaching tools, because e-learning will be here. And specifically for Zambia, we were pushing hard for e-learning, but this COVID pandemic really has just brought all our efforts that we thought we would do next year or the following year, it has brought them forward so that we do them now. The last area that I think I'll just...
Can I beg on you to conclude?
Yes.
Thank
I
you.
think I will conclude here to say that the institution of higher learning certainly should strengthen their collaboration with the industry to enhance research and development, business and communities to better orient their programs towards science, technology, and innovation related development, because the challenges we face in Africa will be addressed through STI, as it were. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to this, and I'll now stop.
Thank you very much. I was just looking at the chat box, and somebody has already paraphrased a phrase that Honorable Moshimba just told us, and that's learning is not just about the classroom, but the culture of the people. So Honorable Dr. Brand, your talk had quite an impact on us. And I think I can round it up on the statements which you made, that the education system must be holistic and relevant so as to help us drive the economic agenda in Africa. And to do this, we must network as we are doing today. So this is all about networking. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. So we move to our discussants for today. And it's my pleasure to introduce Honorable Professor Ala Bagima. He's Minister of Technical and Higher Education in Sierra Leone. He's going to address some of the issues that have been raised by our distinguished panelists, and he will also share some issues that are pertinent to Sierra Leone. Honorable, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking the forum for getting me involved in this webinar. Madam Moderator, the AU Commissioner for Science, Technology, and honorable ministers. A lot have been said by our panelists, and we try to talk about some of them, how they relate to our countries, and the policy and financing modalities that should be done. Again, when we started by talking about mobility, and the last panelist said that indeed we should be training our students in our own institutions. Reforum has done a great job at doing that, where they award scholarships from young people to go and study within African countries. And I think you cannot overstress that. If you go and do agriculture in Canada, or Russia, you are doing agriculture for the temperate region. But if you do agriculture from Sierra Leone to do it in Zambia, you're doing it in Africa, and the environment is the same, and the problems are almost all the same. So it's important that mobility actually becomes an important aspect in our educational systems in Africa. And that brings me to the point of collaboration. Our educational systems have been quite different. You have the Francophone ones, you have the Anglophone one, you have those from Portuguese ones. But I think that it is time, with the advent of the COVID, it has actually provided an opportunity for Africans to now try to work together and make the educational systems more holistic, so that students, in fact, the curricula can be almost the same, so that a student can actually transfer from one country and from one university in a country to another one without losing the years that they have to, or without trying to start all over again. And in terms of maintaining science, technology, and innovation, and I think all that should start from the primary school. or even preschool if we have it. Because I say that because the children that are born now are quite inquisitive and they are in a hurry. And we need to be able to feed those characteristics in those children. Otherwise, we are left behind. The policies that we have are a little bit weak on gender balance and in educational advancement. I am so happy to note today that on this webinar, the ladies seem to outnumber the men, which is something that is strange, but we need to welcome that because if you look at, let me just bring in what all the countries that are not doing very well in COVID, the presidents are men. All the countries that have managed COVID properly, the presidents or prime ministers are women. That goes to say a lot. And I will just leave it as that over there. The last speaker again, panelists talked about dropouts and pregnancy in children, school children. Well, in Sierra Leone, we have, they have divided, it used to be the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, and the president that came in, Julius Maada Bio, divided it to Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education that actually does superintend over from preschool to the end of secondary school. And my ministry that I lead is the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education. In the past, vocational and technical training was really absent. And the president thinks that vocational and technical training should be an important aspect to that point that he has challenged us as a ministry to establish vocational training institutions in all 16 districts so that we can have hands-on training there. But let me go back to what I'm saying about dropouts and pregnancy in children. The Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education just brought to Cabinet about 2 months ago controversial bill, I might say, that we should keep the pregnant girls in school. In the past, they have not allowed them to continue. Now they are continuing and they are very, very happy. The parents are happy that their children are in school. So we need, the president came in and said that in order to change the situation in Sierra Leone, he put emphasis on human capital development. Put emphasis on human capital development and also made it free quality education from preschool to the end of secondary school. So that means that nobody now will say that they don't have money to go to preschool to primary school. In addition to free quality education, the country is also providing uniforms for these students. They are providing lunch for the students. The country has bought school buses to take those children from their homes or to a particular point to their school and bring them back. And they are providing core textbooks all free so that we can start to have a larger number of our population literate enough to move forward. To demonstrate the commitment to education, the government has also increased the budget to education from 12% of the national budget to 20%, so that things that were not being done properly now, they can be done properly. I've already talked about the free quality education. The other issue he did was to give scholarships to all female students, that is in higher education now, that enter university to study science, technology, engineering, agriculture, and mathematics. So there is a change of STEM. Now we are calling it STEAM because we have added agriculture in there. So all the female students who enter university and they are studying science, technology, mathematics, and agriculture go to school free. And he said that we do all this by feeding the brain, by providing free quality education, by feeding the stomach, by providing the food production to increase on it, and by giving them free health care in all these situations. So we said, I'll say again that we need to prioritize on preschool education. That will help students not to drop out of school, because once they start at 3.5 or whatever age they can be, by the time they go to first grade, where you call it, or class 1, they've already mastered the basic issues that they should have mastered at that point. So it is important that African countries, for this emerging pandemic, that to start to work together as a continent to develop issues of continental development, preparedness to emerging pandemic issues. That might not be the last one to see. We saw in our own countries, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, we suffered a lot in Ebola. So this COVID has not taken us by surprise, because the things we used to do, we can do them very well now. And it has really provided an opportunity to go digital. Everybody, most of the people in our countries were afraid of the keyboard, but now, once the students the schools were closed, we went on e-learning, and also lectures were given online, so that the students cannot sit and try to get involved in problems. We have opened both the primary, secondary schools. We have also opened all the teacher training colleges, the technical vocational schools, and also the universities. We are monitoring those very closely. As I said, that we need to develop technical and vocational institutions, as the last panelist said. This is important because we are educating, my thinking is the past educational system that we carry, we are really educating students for unemployment instead of employment. Because you go and do history, financial services, it's not bad to do them, but you need to have the skills to be able to be employed. Most of our students in Sierra Leone, for instance, have degrees, division 1s, but they are on the street. The banks and the companies cannot employ them because they don't have the skills necessary to do it. And we in the past also have looked, taking technical and vocational education to be inferior, which is really what is driving the economy. Once they can be able to learn those skills, carpentry, masonry, and vocational issues, they can be able to get employment, or they'll be able to employ themselves. Now, education cannot be properly carried out if you don't have quality trained and quality teachers. So it's extremely important that we have taken it seriously in Sierra Leone as well, that the president has said that we should have teacher training institutions in every district. So again, he said we should have technical and vocational institutions in every district. We should also have teacher training institutions in every district, so that we can address the training of teachers, that they are well trained, they're qualified, and they're motivated. Otherwise, if you don't motivate them very well, they are not going to do what they should do across the board. We should learn to think big in Africa and collaborate more across the continent. Our research, our universities are not doing very well, at least in Sierra Leone, in terms of research, but we are addressing that by trying to equip all the labs, the science labs in the universities. We're working on that. And for high schools, we're going to have hubs in different cities or towns, so that the schools can take their turn to come and actually do the practical aspect of learning. And that is extremely important. What is also important is that we should be able to review the curriculum to match the needs of the country. We are doing things in our universities that are actually not useful to the country. So it's a waste of resources that we have provided in that matter. And we need to actually address those issues as concretely as we can. In terms of transitioning from traditional education to more skilled training and impact, we should also make sure that will involve the private sector. They have an important aspect to play because it's demand driven, and the demand is from the private sector, like banks and companies. If our educational system is not getting them involved from the start of the planning of curriculum or whatever to the implementation stage, then we are not going to address unemployment. So the private sector must really be involved in that from start to finish. You don't bring them when it is implementation time because we've already missed it. They have to be there from the time you start. And then you are able to make sure that you are going to do the right thing. Now we have a free quality education from the preschool to the end of secondary school. Then it becomes imperative for more people. We are learning from countries like, we have not gone to Zambia, but our people went to Ghana, they went to Tanzania and other countries to learn about student loan scheme. Because if they pay for it, they will take it very seriously. So we are doing that right now. The policy is being developed. But we all know those who have student loan schemes in their countries, or even in the developed countries, the paying back those loans becomes a real challenge. So we have to find very nice ways of trying to encourage those who have taken the loan to be able to pay back so we can be able to support other people that come around to get the education that they want. African countries, again, must increase their budget because if we don't increase the budget for education, then there is no way we are going to change. But if we increase the budget that is allocated to education, then we can find a way to change things and then improve on the quality that we want. Because education, we think in Sierra Leone, is access. We want to provide access to education. But education, as is said, is not only what is in the classroom, but what do you learn in the environment? What do you learn by experience? We want quality education to ensure that actual learning is taking place in this outside of the schools, and the education should be relevant, not just for having to go to schools for quality, but then the needs of the countries are addressed. And then there we go that they be able to make it. And I think
We're having problems.
you didn't hear me?
For a while there, we didn't hear the last thing you mentioned.
The last thing I said was that in all this education, we call it, we want to have access, we want our students to have access to education. So to provide access to education, you must make sure that the institutions are available, and it should be quality education, ensure that the actual learning is taking place not only in schools, but elsewhere. And it should be relevant, not just having schooling and quality education, but that access to quality education. And then the relevance is that the education should be relevant to the needs of the country, wherever that might be. Because if they are not, then we are not addressing our needs of that particular country.
Okay. Honorable Bakima, are you done?
Yes, I'm finished.
Thank you so much for that. And I think what I can say is somebody already in the chat box applauds Sierra Leone for taking into consideration gender in developing its educational policy. And of course, you did say that you emphasized on human capacity development and free quality education through to secondary school. I think that is very commendable. Thank you so much. And so I am told that Professor Mohammed Hassan is around. Was he going to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Please, can we hear from him?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Professor.
I am Muhammad, Deputy Director of Scientific Research and Innovation Authority, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research from Sudan. First of all, I would like to thank you for your support of this webinar. And actually, I appreciate your efforts, great interest in issue of African content. I have some recommendation. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I want to recommend to develop a system of qualification, enhancement of present teaching staff in education institution to attract representatives from the private sector to teach in universities and professional college to develop a strong policy to attract best university gratitude to teaching positions. The second one, we need more support about science, technology, and innovation program, as well as we need also more support for the observatory, because without data, we cannot do nothing in our university and our research centers. Finally, I am asking, how can we provide a fund to succeed these goals? Because without fund, also all of these goals we cannot achieve. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. So we're into the question and answer session right now. And I want to believe that our distinguished panelists have already addressed many of the questions that are in the question and answer box. So Prof. Hammer did not address that question to any one person. So you are free to answer his question, any member of the panel.
I want to respond to the last question by Professor Mohammed
Yes.
from, I think it's Sudan or South Sudan?
Sudan. Mhm.
Sudan, okay. The ministerial meeting of Ministers of Education, Science and Technology actually proposed and endorsed an education fund. And that last year during the ministerial session, it was changed to Education, Science, Technology, Innovation Fund, which we are working together at the African Union Commission with the African Development Bank. And countries, member states were asked to put in 1% of their GDP into that education fund. So we don't, 2%, sorry, into that education fund. So now it is left for member states to start contributing into that funding. I want to respond to some other questions that I was asked. I was typing some answers on the chat box. One of the questions that interested me was, where does education take place? In schools? Definitely not only in schools, because we have formal and informal education. And the formal education occurs in a structured environment, like you go to a school environment with classrooms and students learning together through a trained teacher on a specific subject. Now we have borderless classrooms where we have virtual and online learning. Many people are getting their master's degrees, their PhDs through online training without moving. So we call them borderless classrooms. And online learning is taking place in different programs and outside the classroom. But education also takes place informally in the home, church, the mosque, peer groups, and through live events. That is why we speak about lifelong learning. And if we speak about lifelong learning, it means that we continue to learn. Now, the other question that was attached to this question was that if not, that is, where does education take place? In schools alone? I've responded to that. Then the person asked another question. If not, how can the other agencies complement and reinforce what schools are doing, what schools are doing? That is why we have partnership and collaboration. That is why we sign different MOUs with different education bodies. For example, UNICEF, Save the Children, Ruforum. There are so many of them. So we sign all this because we understand that you cannot do education alone. There are stakeholders, non-governmental organizations who are interested in education. And that is why we strengthened the capacity of stakeholders, particularly through the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, where we have 12 thematic clusters that speaks on peace and education, early child education, higher education, teacher development, curriculum development, because the question of curriculum also came in one of the questions, that how are we reviewing the curriculum? Because we are saying that education should not be education for education's sake, but education that can lead to employment, where the student comes out from that school and is able to create jobs. And that is why we are focusing on entrepreneurship at the Pan-African Virtual and E-University in order to help the bulk of the African population. 70% of our population are actually below the age of 35, and many of them are unemployed. The question is, the African Union Commission is a secretariat of the African Union, and the African Union is made up of member states. Member states are the ones in charge of the specialized technical committees on education, education, science, and technology. And it is these ministers, like we have some of our ministers here present, who are to implement the policies taken at the African Union, which was decided and approved by them and by their head of states and governments. So it is very important that we walk the talk. We move beyond rhetoric and actually catalyze action in our different member states. And I'm happy to listen to what Honorable Dr. Ita have said, also the minister from Benin, the minister from Zambia, their own experiences as ministers, who are the stakeholders, the frontliners in moving forward this education platform and education currencies. Now, if not, how can the other agencies complement or reinforce what schools are doing? It is now for those agencies like UNICEF is found all over Africa, and so they are working together with member states, ministries of education in order to achieve this, because we believe in partnership and it is very important through these thematic clusters that we have. Some of the thematic clusters we have under the Continental Education Strategy for Africa are actually handled by many other stakeholders in the area of education, in the area of science, and in the area of technology. I think I've responded to some of these questions by typing directly on the platform. There's a question I saw: how does the narrow concept of education as what happens in school hurt teaching and learning, or the provision of quality education to all? How does the narrow concept of education? I do not believe that education is narrow, because education can be found informally, formally, in different areas and specific thematic clusters. And when you say that as what happens in school hurt teaching, I do not really understand that, but I'm trying to interpret the question that if we have a narrow concept of education, it will affect the quality of teaching, the quality of education, the quality, because when you educate, when you teach, there are competencies and skills that you expect at the end of the day. So if you are not able to achieve those competencies and skills, then the education, the teaching has not been effective. It therefore has to go back to the curriculum development. It also has to go back to teacher development. It also has to go back to infrastructures. And I saw a question on salaries not being paid. This also affects education, because if teachers are not paid, then they cannot be, they say job motivation is job satisfaction. So we must find a way to make sure that teachers are paid. And if you give them the right remuneration, they will be able to give the quality education that we want. I think I should stop here so that others can respond to some of those questions and I can come back again.
Thank you very much. I think we have barely 3 more minutes to round up. I don't know if any of the panelists have any burning issue there to address. I'm hoping that, yes, our honorary minister from Benin.
Okay, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. J'ai eu beaucoup de questions. Je vais rapidement, pour ce qui concerne comment on appelle la radio, puisque j'ai dit qu'il y a eu il y a eu des cours qui ont été délivrés par la radio. Et je dois préciser déjà que cela a été observé au niveau de l'enseignement primaire. Donc, vous savez, au niveau de l'enseignement primaire, nous avons des écoles dans tous les villages. Et nous avons une radio scolaire éducative qui est la radio principale et qui existait bien avant Covid. Et cette radio avait comme mission de diffuser des émissions éducatives à l'endroit des apprenants, à l'endroit des acteurs, et il y a beaucoup de débats qui se faisaient. Cette radio existait depuis longtemps. Donc, quand Covid est arrivé, on a voulu utiliser donc ce canal pour continuer la communication avec les écoliers. Et donc, cette radio principale est connectée avec 32 autres radios communautaires. Donc, les leçons sont réalisées au niveau de la radio principale et cette radio envoie ses liaisons vers les radios communautaires et ces radios communautaires maintenant délivrent, c'est comme les radios dans les villages. Et donc, les écoles, les écoliers, les parents écoutent ce qui se fait. Et ces radios communautaires également récupèrent les différentes questions qui arrivent au niveau des apprenants et rebalancent ça à la radio principale. Voilà comment, au niveau du primaire, ça a été déjà fait. Si bien que à partir du 11 mai dernier, nous avons ouvert encore les classes pour la plupart des écoliers, sauf les écoliers du primaire qui, eux, ont commencé seulement cette semaine, c'est-à-dire les premières années jusqu'en 5e année du primaire étaient toujours à la maison pour permettre à ceux qui ont leur CEP à passer de bien vouloir le faire. Donc, cette année, cette semaine, les autres qui sont restés à la maison, première année CI jusqu'en CME, ont commencé leur école cette semaine et ils vont le faire pendant 1 mois et demi pour finir donc leur programme. Voilà ce qui est fait au niveau du primaire. Alors qu'au niveau maintenant du supérieur, c'est la plateforme de e-learning. Et j'ai eu une question intéressante, une ou deux questions intéressantes, qui est celle de la connexion. Ceux qui ne sont pas connectés, les pauvres, qui n'ont rien, qui n'ont pas de téléphone et qui n'ont pas de connexion, comment eux ils vont pouvoir suivre les cours? Ça, c'est une question intéressante. Qu'est-ce que nous avons pu faire? Les enseignants même ont contribué, les universités ont contribué, parce qu'il y a des centres communautaires au niveau de certaines régions et ces étudiants vont dans ces centres communautaires où ils suivent maintenant les cours des enseignants. C'est ceux qui n'ont pas d'ordinateur, enfin, qui n'ont pas de téléphone, de smartphone, et qui n'ont pas de connexion Internet, il y a justement le ministère du numérique qui a mis un certain nombre disons, de centres numériques à la disposition de l'université pour que les étudiants qui sont dans ces régions où se trouvent ces points communautaires puissent aller suivre les cours. Vous avez également les enseignants qui ont développé des chartes avec les universités. Mais ce qui est important au niveau du supérieur, c'est que tous les cours ont été numérisés et envoyés aussi bien support papier que support numérique aux étudiants. Donc, les étudiants ont déjà la version de tous les cours. Ce qui restait à faire, c'est l'interaction pour expliquer. Et c'est ce que nous avons fait par la plateforme e-learning. Et pour cette plateforme, le gouvernement a mis, ça fait près de 1 milliard et quelques pour aussi bien la formation que pour le développement des connexions au niveau de cette plateforme e-learning. Ça, c'est la contribution du gouvernement. Le ministère a contribué à former maintenant les enseignants pour justement savoir comment ça se passe, comment ils vont développer leurs cours, comment ils vont développer les interactions, récupérer les questions des apprenants. Voilà ce que le ministère a fait. Le ministère a également organisé des forats de discussion avec les apprenants pour être sûr que les apprenants même ont des soucis, des préoccupations pour les prendre en compte. Voilà ce que nous avons fait pour ce qui concerne la plateforme de e-learning. C'est autour de ça que j'ai eu beaucoup de questions. Sinon, en dehors de cela, le reste des questions, c'est sur le système de recherche vraiment du Bénin. Est-ce que, tel que la recherche se passe, est-ce que réellement nous sommes fiers, nous sommes satisfaits? On n'est pas encore totalement satisfaits parce qu'il nous manque les plateformes donc les plateformes.
I would like to ask you to round up because we are
OK, d'accord. Merci beaucoup. Donc, j'espère que j'ai répondu à la plupart des questions. S'il y a d'autres, nous allons devoir les répondre au fur et à mesure par les mails et les adresses. Merci.
Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to honestly thank all our distinguished panelists. Dear participants, thank you very much for your questions, very thought-provoking, and it only went to show the interest that you had in this webinar and all the discussions. So before I close, join me all participants to once more appreciate sincerely Her Excellency Professor Sarah Anyang Agbo, Honorable Minister Morangi, Honorable Minister Yai, Honorable Minister Mushimba, Dr. Da of the World Bank, our discussants, Honorable Professor Bakima, and of course, through Professor Adibala, we thank Ruforum for having organized such a wonderful webinar. It has been my joy moderating this 7th edition of the webinar. Thank you very much for your participation. Please join us the next webinar, but before I sign off, I'll invite Professor Adibala to give the closing remarks. Professor.
Our moderator, our distinguished commissioner, our honorable ministers, we just appreciate the dialogue. We appreciate what is happening at the African Union level. We appreciate learning from our member countries on what you are doing. I think it's by such dialogue that we can learn from each other. And I pray, as the commissioner said, we need to move to action. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
It's a good one.
Fine. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Prof. How do we switch this thing on?
Benin, like so many African countries, is facing serious challenges with malnutrition and food insecurity.
The micronutrients malnutrition is very critical in our country.
Could the continent's most iconic tree hold the key to solving micronutrient malnutrition?
Baobab is one of the most important tree species used for cultural, economy, food, medicine, for many purposes.
The baobab has deep cultural significance. Seen by some as a deity, many important rituals are performed underneath it, some for better crop production, some for better rainfall, and most infamously, voodoo ceremonies. Working instead with the science of this iconic African tree, Roo Forum grantees Achille and Flora are a formidable husband and wife team.
I get to meet Achille the first time at the university when I started my training in agriculture.
Firstly, I met her. I asked her to be my friend. Now we are together. We have 2 children.
The combination of Flora's research as a food scientist and her husband's innovations with natural resource management form a multidisciplinary approach, key to the significant impact they are making on malnutrition in Benin. Baobab trees grow slowly and they take decades to fruit. The leaves are also harvested intensely by local people, threatening the resource. MSc student Vale explains their solution.
And the experiment we are carrying out here confirmed that there is a possibility for local people to cultivate baobab trees and then have the leaves in a timing of 2 to 3 months.
The potential of growing baobabs and producing leaves within one season for both human nutrition and fodder is being demonstrated in this project. This is research that is important to many Roo Forum universities and to communities in East and Southern Africa. In the village of Trelema, we see how Flora and her MSc students teach the farmers to use baobab and moringa leaves to fortify their food. This adds much-needed vitamins and minerals to the foods consumed mostly by women and children.
Our aim is to find a way to combine natural resources that are already available in the localities.
We speak to a local farmer about the research team's presence in her village.
So she's saying that in the past, the rate of malnutrition was very, very high in this village. And now it is improving. It has not finished, but it is improving.
The support of critical baobab research in Benin is the story of Roo Forum's increasing presence and impact in West Africa.
For me, Roo Forum is a driver on the continent, but it is a kind of a very big university in which other universities are involved.
I think Roo Forum is a very, very powerful institution, and with Roo Forum we can do a lot.